You know, every now and then a story surfaces that shakes off all the usual noise we hear about privilege, shortcuts, and opportunities being lopsided. It reminds us that grit isn't just a fancy word, it's a lived reality. This is one of those stories. It's about a young guy, son of a rickshaw driver, who against all odds cracked one of the toughest exams in the country, the Indian Administrative Service, or IAS. Now, if you know anything about that exam, it's not just another test. It's like climbing Mount Everest with your bare hands. So picture this, a boy growing up in a small town. Home isn't some cushy apartment with Wi-Fi in every corner. It's a modest one-room house, sometimes buzzing too much with noise, sometimes too quiet because everyone's asleep from exhaustion. His father, a cycle rickshaw driver, sweating day in and day out, pedaling through blistering heat, drenching monsoons, chilly mornings. All for a modest income that barely covered meals, rent, and school essentials. Now, here's the thing. For most kids in that situation, survival itself takes up so much energy that dreaming big almost feels like a luxury. But this boy was different. He had this fire. Books became his safe place, his weapon, his escape route. And while his father was out pulling the rickshaw, he was pulling long nights under the dim light of a second-hand lamp, sometimes with borrowed books, sometimes with photocopied notes that friends lent him. There's this unspoken part of stories like his, the shame and the self-doubt that creeps in. You're in a classroom surrounded by kids who can afford coaching institutes, online subscriptions, crash courses, private tutors. Meanwhile, you read just hoping the free library doesn't shut early so you can squeeze in a few more pages. And it's not just about resources. It's also about the small humiliations like not being able to afford proper clothes for an interview or having teachers whisper behind your back, wondering if you'll manage to get anywhere. That's the weight he carried, but he kept moving. He wasn't some prodigy who got it all on the first go. He failed more than once. The first time he sat for the prelims, it was like a brutal slap of reality. He walked out with that hollow feeling in his chest, thinking maybe this dream was too big for someone like him, but instead of quitting, he regrouped. He went back, studied harder, built endurance the way athletes train their bodies, except this was mental stamina. And each time, he got closer, and finally, one year, it clicked. He cleared the prelims, then beefed it up with the mains, and when the interview came, he walked in with this quiet confidence. It wasn't the polished English that impressed the panel, it wasn't flashy degrees. It was the authenticity in his answers, the lived experience of someone who'd seen the hardest sides of life and still believed he could serve the people, that carries weight. Bureaucrats are often detached, but here was someone who understood poverty firsthand, talking not from imagination, but from memory. When the results came out, his name was on the final merit list. Imagine that moment. His father, still in his rickshaw, got the call or maybe heard it from someone on the street. That shaky pause before he let it sink in. His son, who studied by candlelight, had cracked the IAS. For him, it wasn't about prestige or a badge of honor. It was freedom from years of struggle, from the constant cycle of limited options. It was proof that the grind had been worth it. Now, let's step back for a second. Some people might hear this and think, oh, it's just a rare exception, but honestly, stories like his reveal something bigger. Hardship doesn't always break you, sometimes it builds muscles that privilege never could. Kids born into comfort don't need to worry about dinner, electricity bills, or whether their father's rickshaw tires have worn out. But when you do grow up with that weight, it forces you to find resilience that makes you unshakable. And the beauty is, after becoming an officer, he never forgot where he came from. When he stepped into government service, he didn't treat it like a desk job. He worked not as some distant administrator, but as someone who knew the system from the bottom up. He focused on public education, on schemes that could give kids like him better tools. Because deep down, he knew there are thousands of children in small towns who have the intelligence but lack the resources. I think that's the most powerful part of this story. It's not just about clearing an exam. That's one milestone, it's about breaking a cycle. It's about saying, hey, poverty isn't a destiny because it's easy to romanticize struggle from the outside. But trust me, living it is no fairy tale. It's exhausting, and yet he flipped the script. So when someone tells you that your background determines your ceiling, think of him. Remember that it's not always the kid in the air-conditioned coaching center who makes it. Sometimes it's the one riding a borrowed bike to the library, skipping meals, and studying through the noise of a crowded home. That's the real story here, and honestly, success stories like his are important to keep alive, not to create some fantasy that hardship automatically leads to greatness, because let's be real, not everyone catches a break. But rather to remind us that no gate is fully locked. Persistence, grit, and that burning sense of purpose, they can crack through some of the toughest walls. So next time you see a rickshaw puller on the road, think about what went into funding his child's education. Those hours of pedaling aren't just survival. Sometimes they're seeds being planted, quietly, for a dream that seems too far but one day blooms into reality. This boy is living proof, from a rickshaw driver's son to an IAS officer. Not just a success story and inspiration for every kid who wonders if their dreams are too big for their circumstances. Because the truth is, dreams don't check your bank account before they choose you, they just demand you fight for them.